I cannot tell you how happy I am to be with you in this place today. I love the opportunity to come back here and serve and support and help. And I was very honored to be asked to be on the sabbatical team. But to actually be with the congregation is something I haven't done in a very long time. So I'm very, very content right now. Obviously, helping children grow is the main theme of this reflection. I don't like the word sermon. I never have, and I certainly don't think that as a person who never gave birth or had the experience of raising a child, that I have the right to tell you how to do it. However, I can speak from the lived experience of being a teacher and the unique view of being an infant-toddler teacher. I was fortunate enough to realize early on that I could not interact or care for, understand, or love any child outside the context of their family. And having Helen with me today is very special because when I was the toddler teacher at the UB Early Childhood Research Center, I took care of the twins. Keenan and Heike, they were with me and they were precious. And when I met them years later, when I came here to do my internship, they didn't know me. And that's okay. When you're an infant and toddler teacher, you never expect your students to grow up and remember you. It's just too early in their experience. But it was so nice to see them growing. I had them for the ages of 2 and 3. And what I remember mostly is watching this young couple pick up, drop off their children. And between those times, they were working hard to advance their education and their career paths and raising 2 children at the same time. The twins were bright and funny and impish. That's the perfect word for both of them. They were impish and they were curious. When you plant potatoes, you get potatoes. They were very smart. And their parents were tired. And they were tenacious in their effort to do the best they could for their children. One of my fondest memories is how we finally got Scott to go to the zoo one day. I didn't think that would happen, but he came with us on a field trip, and it's one of my loveliest memories. I realized that whenever I took care of children, theirs and other people's, I was also helping the parents, the grandparents, and the caregivers take care of the family. I was part of the extended family. Now, my concern and my interest and my admiration for parents and children didn't stop when I left the early childhood world. During my career, before I became a chaplain, I worked in fields that always involved families and children in various situations. In Head Start and Early Head Start, I worked with parents and children in poverty. In substance abuse prevention, I heard the stories of those families who had dealt with addictions, sometimes the adults, sometimes the children, sometimes both generations in the same household. And I enjoyed and I was honored to hear those stories of that very difficult journey. Some of you might not know, but I worked in foster care for a very short time. And it was a very short time because it was a very difficult thing to maneuver. In foster care, I saw the heaviness of one parent handing their child to a stranger for care because the law said they had to, and in most cases it was the best thing for the child. But I also saw the joys of family working hard to pull their lives together, fulfilling their dreams of a healthier life for themselves and their children. I got to see a lot of reunification, so I did get to see some joy. I learned a lot about families and parenting from some of the best and some of the worst. But I will tell you that no matter how sad a family situation is, there is one thing that all families have in common. They love their kids. And sometimes that love gets lost in translation. This happens when there isn't money. It happens when a single parent is alone and isolated with no support system. No parent fails on purpose, just like no child fails on purpose. And yes, there are those unusual situations where there's mental illness involved, but nobody asks for that either. We are all in this together. We are a village. And the reason I'm talking about my overall career to get us going before I entered ministry is that once I did enter ministry, I started to develop a theory about families. You know, when you train as a chaplain, you have to do what's called theological reflection. And don't let the word theological scare you. All it means is that every interaction that I had with a person or a group of people, I was trained and taught and directed to think about it in terms of what's the meaning behind what I just engaged with. So when I became a chaplain, I constantly went back into my earlier years. I didn't become a chaplain, or I didn't enter ministry until I was 48. I had a lot of career before I came into it. I developed a theory about families, doing a reflection. And my theory is that a family is on a spiritual journey together, and the life they live together is a spiritual practice. So those years of reflection informs today's sermon. So with all of that said, let me start talking about family spiritual tools for a spiritual life. Why? It's important that a family is intentional about their spirituality and what gives them meaning. And what gives them meaning offers a strong foundation, not just for the family today, but in generations to come. What is spirituality? That's the first question. And the answer is another question. Spirituality is what gives you meaning. You don't have to believe in a God to have a spiritual life. You don't have to go to a church, although it's very nice that you came. But none of that is real spirituality. Real spirituality is, what do you get up in the morning for? What gives you inspiration? What makes you always striving to be better? What do you love? That's the big question. What do you love? Who do you love? And sometimes there doesn't have to be a why behind love. It just is. So to begin, I want to explain the title of this sermon, because I'm sure when you read it, you kind of looked at it like, where is she going? Where the wild geese grow. What am I talking about? I'm guessing that some of you figured out the pieces I was putting together. It's pretty much a mashup of a couple of different pieces of literature. And one is Mary Oliver's Wild Geese, which you are all very familiar with. And the other piece of that title is the classic book by Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are. So I basically said where the wild geese grow, because we're talking about how to help children grow. The abundance of literature that we can use for teaching and reading and simply loving the children is endless. And I'm thrilled to say that it becomes more diverse and inclusive every year, giving parents and grandparents tools to help guide children through the continuum of human existence and reality, which gets larger and wider and deeper all the time. We hope that the children will embrace these understandings and live with it in peace and love, always recognizing the dignity and worth of every human being they meet along the way. Literature is powerful. It's not just an educational tool, it's a spiritual tool. I say this because when children are read to, there's certainly the experience of words and sounds and literacy, but it's that act of closeness with the child that is the spiritual practice. That love being offered in the form of time and energy, that sharing of meaning. The description of this sermon is really a description of the whole service. Today we have heard both readings from famous and not so famous, UU writings and non-UU writings, all calling for the relationship between a child and family. The relationship is the biggest spiritual tool. I chose all the readings today because they reflect family relationships, each very different authors, different generations. So let's start out by looking at Mary Oliver's Wild Geese. You've heard it before countless times. And today I want to suggest that this is a good family poem, whether you're UU or not. You could probably say it with me. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you about mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. In this poem, I think that for a spiritual family, this poem would make a beautiful covenant, if you think about it, because it is talking about how to be human and relational in a family. And I don't usually use the word covenant lightly. I really think that if you needed something in writing to describe your relationship, this poem would really be a beautiful piece. So I want to make some points. Now, I'm not a very intellectual reader or interpreter. I'm just not, and that I'm good with that. But I want to make a couple points about why this poem is so significant for families. First of all, parents and children do not have to be perfect, or even try to pretend to be. And please, for the sake of everyone, don't ever make it an expectation of yourself or anyone else. Perfection is a construct, and it's actually a white construct. Share with each other. The good, the bad, the shames, the pride, share it all. We all have the right to our own private thoughts, our own private dreams. But when things are heavy on your heart, give them to somebody you love. Please keep in mind, family does not have to be biological. Your sharing creates a rich family relationship, and in sharing, the spiritual practice becomes richer. Have a family understanding of the reality of this life. Bad things happen. We'll get through it. Family strength is a spiritual tool. You don't have to suffer alone. You don't have to suffer alone. You've got us. And no matter what happens, we will get through it together. This life, this is our life. Things happen, and life will go on, and so will we. If you have a sacred space for your family in your home, a framed copy of this poem is very inspirational. So let's look at Maurice Sendak Where the Wild Things Are. Now, this was published in 1963, the year I was born, so you know this book is old. But the beautiful thing about this book is that everywhere in America right now, tomorrow morning, some toddler or preschooler is going to take this book off the bookshelf and run to a teacher and say, read this to me. Almost 60 years after its publication, the book has legs, as they say, because it tells a typical story of parent and child interacting with each other in a difficult moment. As a toddler teacher, I read this too many times. And there was a point in my career that I had the whole thing memorized, which wasn't a problem. Children love it because it reminds them of things they like or things they want. They love the fact that the little boy is wearing a wolf costume. His name is Max. And the wild things are a little scary, but not when you're on a teacher's lap or a parent's lap. They like the fact that Max enters into an imaginary place, a jungle. He becomes the king and gets to wear a crown. And of course, if a teacher makes the appropriate noises like the wild things, all the better. The story is something right out of a real parent-child relationship. Max pulls a tantrum. A very developmentally appropriate thing to do. And I know some of us are jealous that sometimes we think, well, we're too old to throw one. So his mother, after his tantrum, sends him to his room, and Max escapes into an imaginary jungle and becomes king. And he has a great time. He has a wonderful time. But he gets lonely, and he gets hungry, and he decides to go home. And when he arrives in his bedroom, he finds that his mom has left him a warm supper. This book is a brilliant way to teach children what they can do with their emotions. Now, we're okay with kids when they show sadness or tears or silliness or shyness, but when they show anger, it triggers something in us. We get very uncomfortable with anger. And anger is incredibly normal for the human person. If you went through your whole life without ever getting angry, you haven't been paying attention. This book shows us that parents don't have to punish. They can teach with patience and time and love and a warm supper. They can offer their children time to rest, to explore their feelings, use their imagination, and that love is the foundation of behavior guidance. Allowing for safe emotional expressions creates a safe space for adults and children and builds trust. I know I've been with a lot of families, and there's nothing more terrifying than a toddler or a preschooler throwing themselves on the floor at Target and having a tantrum in front of strangers. Nothing worse. I always said this to parents. I said, the next time that happens and people are staring at you judgmentally, point to your child and say, "Isn't he doing great?" Because they are. They are acting out their development. And we have to take our ego out of their development. Obviously, you don't want a kid to be violent or hurt themselves, but a usual temper tantrum is really just all about getting their anger out. And what a beautiful thing to let them do that without losing your trust or your love. We heard our story today, The Gentle Teaching of the Golden Rule, and there's a book for a child on just about anything these days, and it gets better every year. Please don't stop buying children's books. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you don't have any little ones in the house anymore. You deserve to read yourself stories. Keep reading to your children and let them read to you. This sharing of meaning deepens your spiritual life as a family and as individuals. Remember, love is about meaning and relationship and experiencing things together. Go out there sometime in the next few months and buy yourself a great children's book. And maybe ask your grown-up child to read it to you. When we're talking about family life, we are actually talking about a spiritual practice. Your family is a spiritual practice. Even if you don't have children. You have relatives, you have extended family, you have chosen family, you have pets. You are a family, and your practice of being a family is a spiritual practice. The relationship between children and their caregivers is the most important tool we have to move our world forward. The family relationship gives the opportunity for joys and sorrows and brings successes and challenges for growth. The family relationship is in itself a journey that shapes each of its members and leaves a mark on everyone. It creates memories, good and bad. No family is without its rough spots. The journey of this relationship is a gift if it's viewed as one. It's about intention. It's about intentionally seeking out the meaning in your lives. Some days it's easy and some days it's not. That's life. There are aspects of family life that definitely contribute to spiritual growth, and I want to talk about a few of those as spiritual tools. First of all, your church life is a beautiful piece of your family life, of your personal life, obviously, but when you are raising other people, or when you are living with other people, sharing a church life is the strongest tool you can have. Being part of a community, an extended family, your church family, because this is your church home. Each other, being together. Being together in sacred space is a spiritual practice. So let's talk about that a little deeper. Our UU principles are a wonderful guide for living fully, not just in a faith tradition, but living fully in this world. You don't have to be a UU to read those principles and get a lot out of it. I actually thought about this as I was writing this, that if you look at all of our principles, they're all a variation of the Golden Rule. Living those principles out for your family members to see is one of the best contributions there is. And many times it's the children who develop a church connection and role model for the adults, which is absolutely fine. You know, our UU principles, I did a spiritual care call a couple months ago, and they actually had a copy of the principles on their wall in their home. They honored the principles in a sacred space, which I thought was really amazing. I had never seen anybody do that before. And there are things about our faith tradition that offer even more tools. Letting your children go to protests with you. Protesting together as a family, that's a spiritual tool. It's a spiritual exercise. Depending on the topic and the level of tension at the event, we want to keep safe. We don't want babies to be at angry, heated debates and street fights. But if it's a garden variety protest, let them see you act out your faith. All these things have got to be considered. But protesting is one of the most important spiritual practices in our faith tradition because social justice is the energy that drives this train. And that's a lesson that our families need to learn from the ground up. Now, as some of you know, I recently left the UU Church in Buffalo. I had a one-year contract as their acting DRE for 1 year. And what a year it was. What a journey the last 2.5 years have been for everyone. Single, familied. And being someone with no children, there was no way that I could really fathom raising a family during these weary times. We had everything. We had the pandemic, we had protests, we had racism thrust in our face to the point where we could not deny it any longer. That takes a lot of energy to witness. Until I started working closely with the parents again at the church, I had no idea how stressful it was. Because, you know, when you are away from something for a lot of years, you do tend to lose some of that memory. COVID was a stressor, obviously, and not just the fear of the children getting it, but the fear of the effects of the lack of socialization. That was the parents' biggest worry. Everyone was, and still is, I think, zoomed out. So programming for the RE program was really, really tough, but the team did the best they could, and we got through it. But in May, the anxiety of parents came to a point of crisis. The event on May 14th was shocking, and the next day was a Sunday. Before service, parents were crowding around me like never before. They had witnessed what we had all witnessed on TV. People were injured and taken out of this world because of the color of their skin. And the anxiety that these parents held for their children was palpable. They were asking me things like, well, what do we tell them? What do we do? And I answered with other questions, which I'm sure didn't help. I said, well, what are they doing and what are they asking? And they responded, nothing. But they will, and I don't know what to say. And I really felt very heavy for these parents. And I walked around the RE floor upstairs during programming. I went into the spirit playroom, and that's where the little kids are, 4, 5, 6. And I wanted to observe the children because the parents that were coming up to me were the parents of the really young ones. And so the children were up in the spirit playroom, and I was watching them, and they were fine. They were quite unaware. They were listening to their spirit play book, and they were playing with their clay, and they were painting, and they seemed okay. But after service, the questions came at me again. And I reported to them that, well, I went up to spirit play, and, all of your children, they seemed very unaware. I listened in on conversations. It never came up. I looked at their dramatic play. It didn't represent anything violent or scary. Today, they are okay, but I understand your concern, and I did. The parents were not calmed by this at all. But what if they ask, what do I say? I really try hard not to offer knee-jerk answers to questions that are that heavy. And so I said, well, I've got some really good resources at home. Let me send them out to you tonight. So I went home, and I needed a way to respond lovingly and empathetically. But what they wanted from me, I could not give them. It was clear that the parents were the ones with anxious behavior and questions that needed answers, not the little ones. The older students were processing the event and had good support systems, and their families didn't need to ask me, and I was fine with that. But this is what I sent out, and I'm paraphrasing my own letter. In times of crisis, it is perfectly normal to want to save and protect your children. It is normal to want to have the perfect answers at the ready, and it is admirable to want to be the parent that heals all wounds. But it's not possible. You are human beings raising human beings, and there was no way that anyone would have had the answers at the ready for anything that happened in the last 2.5 years. In times of crisis, parents and caregivers need to check in with themselves about their own needs first. Now, I know this idea is almost taboo, and I know that this idea is shocking to some. I've mentioned this concept to others before and was responded to with faces of disbelief and anger and how dare you, and I'm a great parent. I would never put myself first. Well, we've heard it before, haven't we? When an airplane has an emergency and those oxygen masks drop, the adult needs to put theirs on first. A parent in distress cannot help a child in distress. Parent self-care is needed more than you know. And by taking care of yourselves, you are teaching your children how to care for and honor themselves down the road. You could be possibly teaching them how to take care of you down the road when you need it. It's not selfish. It's a teaching tool. It's a spiritual tool that they and you deserve. Self-care is a spiritual tool inside a family. You honor your body, your mind, your soul, your weary, weary soul. Because your job is to prepare your children for their experiences in this world. And if every time you fix it, and every time you have the perfect answer at the ready, you're not preparing them for reality, because they're going to have those same experiences. And you need to teach them that it's okay not to be perfect. The last spiritual tool I would like to offer up is the practice of listening to your children. No matter how young they are, no matter how old they are. Listening to the children, the students, the youth, and the young adults in your family is the greatest spiritual contribution you can make to that family. Your children start developing wisdom the minute they arrive on this earth. And our egos tell us that we're the adult. We hold the wisdom. We have all the answers. And once we accept and embrace our own human weaknesses and don't try to hide how frail we are sometimes, we actually become authentic. And becoming authentic is how we develop authentic relationships with our loved ones. And allowing for your own authenticity is a gift for others. Authenticity is the greatest spiritual gift you will give your family. Please listen to the children. They are wise beyond their years. And I'd like to show you an example of this. This video has been around for a while. Some of you may have seen it. And I want to show it because it shows the nature, the innocence, the pure wisdom of a child who lives in the real world.
No one else than me. Mom, are you ready to be his friend?
Yes.
Try not to be that high up to be friends. I want everything to be low, okay?
Okay.
Just try your best. I don't want you and my dad to be replaced and meanies again. I want you and my dad to be placed as settled and be friends. I'm not trying to be mean. I just want everyone to be friends. And if I can be nice, I think all of us can be nice too. I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm trying to do my best in my heart. Nothing else than that. I want you, Mom, my dad, everyone to be friends. I want everyone to be smiling, not like being mad. I want everything to smile. Especially when I see someone, I want them to smile. Especially Nana, everyone. I want everyone to smile. And if that's for my dad and you, Mom, I think you can do it. I think you can settle your mean heights down a little to short heights. Then it's both, okay? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be a bully. I'm trying to be steady on the floor, not way down, on straight, on the middle where my heart is. My heart is something. Everyone else's heart is something too. And if we live in a world where everyone's being mean, everyone's going to be a monster in their future. What if there's just a little bit of persons and we will eat them, then no one will ever be here. Only the monsters in our place. We need everyone to be a person. Everyone, including me and my mom, everyone. I just want everything to be settled down. Nothing else. I just want everything to be good as possible. Nothing else.
Thank you, Tiana. Come and give mommy chụp chụp. I love you.
I love you too.
She wasn't trying to be a bully, but she was so wise. Learn from the children. They have more wisdom than we do many times. Learn from each other, and above all, learn from your own deep and tender souls. So be it. For our closing words, this is called A Prayer for Our Children by Shalane Harkin. Your children want you with a sacred fervor. It's not the kind of desire that will let you stay hidden amidst the shadows of flattery. They don't want to admire some prettied up shell of you that you show to the public. They want to drudge up your heart out of the conditioned nonsense of serious occupations and persuade you to collect the stars in your skirts, berry stains on your cheeks of your life, and come to remember your original joy. Children are your life's great revolutionaries if you let them be. They want to tear you with their tenderness from the arms of capitalism, that your heart might be able to hold them. They want to liberate you from the straitjacket of control with their joyful chaos. They don't care at all if you're rich or smart or beautiful or thin, and they're marvelously disinterested in your external success. They want you to crouch down on all fours and invite you to burrow into the sacred aliveness of the moment with them. They are unshakably certain this need to prove your worth is empty business. They want to dismantle the hierarchy you've placed on experience that makes you so miss your life. They invite you to let go of your doctrine of perfectionism and behold the sacred mess of this moment. Oh, let them rewrite Scripture in crawled crayon that only lists commandments of joy. Your kids do not want you to relate to God through fear. They want you to believe wholeheartedly in the God who would want you to put extra whipped cream on things, who wants you to tickle his belly or her belly that it might send a lightning bolt of laughter through your heart, in the goddess who would a million times over prefer to show you the tenderness of her weeping rather than the wrath of hiding it. Children come into this world knowing devotion is best offered through the wonder that shines their eyes. Listen to your children. Grow into a heart that can genuinely delight in them. Be a disciple to this wonder your children want to turn your life upside down to show you. Listen to your children.